What if I told you that the world's longest-lasting military alliance began not with a roar, but with a whisper of fear? Picture this: a small village nestled at the foot of unpredictable mountains. The villagers, constantly threatened by avalanches, realize they can't survive alone. Each family brings something to build a protective barrier: wood, tools, or manpower, because they know that if one avalanche strikes, it could bury them all. That's NATO in a nutshell. A collective shield built by nations who understood that unity was their best defense against catastrophe. Our story begins in 1945, as World War II's thunderous guns fell silent. Europe lay in ruins, cities were leveled, economies shattered, and trust between nations was fragile. The war had exposed humanity's capacity for destruction, and with peace came a sobering realization: such chaos could never be allowed to happen again. But peace didn't mean safety. A new threat was emerging from the east. The Soviet Union, once an ally against Nazi Germany, began expanding its influence across Eastern Europe, installing puppet governments and tightening its grip like a vice. By 1947, the United States, itself weary from the sacrifices of war, could see the storm brewing. Soviet leader Joseph Stalin wasn't just protecting his borders. He was spreading communist ideology like wildfire, turning countries like Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia into satellites orbiting Moscow. Winston Churchill's famous words rang true. An iron curtain had descended across Europe. Fear gripped the West, fear of another war, fear of being swallowed by this growing giant. That fear crystallized into action with the Truman Doctrine. In 1947, U.S. President Harry Truman boldly declared that America would support free peoples resisting oppression. But words needed action to back them up. The first test came with the Berlin airlift in 1948. When Stalin blocked all land routes into West Berlin, the Western Allies responded with an unprecedented operation, flying in food, fuel, and supplies to sustain the city's people. For nearly a year, planes buzzed overhead, defying Soviet intimidation and proving that cooperation could outlast aggression. By 1949, the Western nations knew they needed more than ad hoc responses. 12 countries, including the United States, Canada, the UK, and France, came together to form the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO. At its core was Article 5, a revolutionary concept. An attack on one was an attack on all. This collective defense pact was their answer to Soviet expansionism, a clear signal that any aggression would meet united resistance. But NATO wasn't a smooth ride from the start. France, the UK, and the US often clashed over strategies, while smaller nations like Norway and Denmark worried about being dragged into conflicts beyond their borders. It wasn't love that held them together. It was necessity. Each country understood that standing alone against the Soviet Union would be like facing an avalanche without the barrier. The Cold War turned NATO into a fortress. Across Europe, NATO built bases, stationed troops, and stockpiled weapons to deter any Soviet aggression. The Warsaw Pact, formed in 1955 by the Soviet Union and its allies, became NATO's mirror image. It was like two heavyweight wrestlers circling each other, flexing their muscles, but never throwing the first punch. NATO's strength wasn't just in its armies, it was in its unity. Yet even unity had its limits. In 1966, French President Charles de Gaulle decided NATO's military headquarters should leave France, citing a desire for greater independence. France didn't leave NATO entirely, but pulled out of its integrated military command. Some mocked NATO, saying it now stood for no action, talk only. But the alliance endured, proving that even disagreements couldn't dismantle its foundation. And then came the pivotal year of 1989. The Berlin Wall, the most iconic symbol of Cold War division, crumbled, and with it, the Soviet Union's grip on Eastern Europe. NATO's original purpose seemed fulfilled, but a new question loomed. Was NATO still needed? Critics called it a Cold War relic, but NATO adapted. Former Warsaw Pact nations like Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic joined, finding security in the alliance. NATO wasn't just about military defense anymore. It became a guardian of shared values like democracy and freedom. The 21st century brought new challenges. Terrorism, cyber attacks, and hybrid warfare replaced the clear-cut threats of the past. After 9/11, Article 5 was invoked for the first time, with NATO allies standing beside the US in its fight against terrorism. NATO's mission in Afghanistan became its largest coalition operation, showing that its principles of unity and mutual defense extended beyond Europe. Today, NATO faces a resurgent Russia, growing tensions with China, and debates over member contributions. Some question its relevance, but history offers a clear lesson. Alliances like NATO aren't just built for today's challenges. They're a shield for the uncertainties of tomorrow. NATO's story is one of resilience, adaptation, and unity against the odds, much like the villager's barrier against avalanches. So what do you think? Is NATO still the shield the world needs, or is it time for something new? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Together we'll uncover more stories that shaped our world. See you in the next video.